Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the Public Service Appointments Bill 2020.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the first reading of the Public Service Appointments Bill 2020.
Question that the aforementioned bill be ready at first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it.
Congratulatory and/or obituary speeches resumed.
Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to indicate today, sir, that we meet here to revere the late Professor Right Honorable Owen Seymour Arthur, a man who rose from humble circumstances to the highest heights in this country and, of course, in the region. His parents were regular rural people. His mother, Doll, of whom he often spoke very, very proudly, and indeed his dad, from way back in St. Peter, with his siblings. And his parents instilled in him the virtues of life and living. All those principles that are necessary for one to be able to live and get along with people in the community and to serve at every level. And so the humility, the honesty, the character, they taught him about charity, how to love, how to share, values such as respect, thrift, love for God and mankind, service to community and country. And then he was a boss at quoting Bible verses. He would always talk about everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Or he would talk about you have to go through the hottest fire to get the strongest steel. It really was a distinct honor, sir, and a privilege to have become acquainted with such an outstanding son of the soil. The late Owen Seymour Arthur, the Right Honorable, I met him in 1983, to be exact, when he was a young, brilliant senator. I was the president of the St. Thomas constituency branch, and of course, having had dialogue with the Honorable Prime Minister then, the late Tom Adams now, when he spoke about this brilliant economist who had just arrived from studying and working in Jamaica, and all of his exploits, I felt so happy to have heard of an ordinary guy from St. Peter being uplifted and revered in that manner by the then Honorable Prime Minister. So I advised him, having heard him in the Senate one day, and I advised the Prime Minister, sir, wouldn't it be good to invite him to address the St. Thomas constituency branch on a second Sunday at the Holy Innocents School? And of course, the Prime Minister supported it, and he extended that invitation. It was a moment for me, sir, in my youthfulness at the constituency branch level and being the president, to have met this young, handsome, and brilliant young man who, when he spoke, attracted the attention of everybody in the hall from the beginning to the end. To me, he was like a young batsman who scored a century in his first innings. It was that outstanding. I, being a young woman wet behind the ears, was so deeply impressed with his wit, the wisdom, the delivery of his presentation, and indeed his maturity. And then the Prime Minister said, Cynthia, don't you think I should run this young man somewhere in the Barbados Labour Party? He is so sharp. And of course, then I'm trying to grapple in this political area. In my young age, I said, but sir, obviously, we have to use him in the Barbados Labour Party. And so said, so done, when that by-election came up in St. Peter. And the rest is history. We know he became victorious on his second try. And of course, his representation would have gone on for many years, indeed more than 3 decades. Actually, I became so familiar with the St. Peter branch, and then, of course, St. Lucie as well, that I would go there on a third Sunday. I think that was the meeting time. And we would always have a load of people going down with the late Lawrence Johnson in his vehicle that looked so much like Ted Fast. He said he came to political life to stop poor people from being poor. He wanted a graduate in every household. And he successfully achieved many of the goals through the policies and programs that he had outlined in his various manifestos for his 14-year leadership that for me was one of the most profound. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that all of his intentions and almost every speech he made, he talked about enfranchising people, making Barbadians become more self-sufficient instead of being reliant on handouts and so on and so forth. And so the emphasis in most of his manifestos over those periods was to ensure that persons who were disenfranchised were empowered in a special way. Those who were the most vulnerable were targeted so that they can develop and move from dependency to independence and perhaps later on interdependence. And so his jobs, number one, was most integral in whatever he had to do. And we saw every engine of our society start to expand and to grow. When it came to construction, nearly everybody in the village got a job in construction and building of roads, building of houses. We were able to build so many housing units. And then with the mortgage finance company and the 100% mortgage that he persisted must happen to help poor people from staying poor, and the kind of money that was put into the Housing Credit Fund on lending and the loans that were given to ordinary people to build on a water toilet or to expand the house, because generally rural and urban people have a lot of children. Poor people usually have a lot of children. And so he put such policies in place to make sure that poor people would have had a chance and an opportunity to get a stake in this country. And that too, sir, helped to cement me with the fondness and the love that I extended to my late great leader. Now, Mr. Speaker, to prove of his brilliance, we had a newspaper in the Labour Party called The Beacon with a theme that says, "Out of darkness, light." And it is interesting that in June 1984, and if you will allow me to, I can make it a document of this chamber with this one little paragraph where it spoke of Owen Arthur and his brilliance as a young senator, and other colleagues in this honorable chamber, sir, would have said in there, sir, that in the Senate, and I quote, to which he was elevated in October 17, the exact date of his birthday, his calm, clear, concise, and always coherent analyses have made him the prominent debater in the upper chamber when his every speech is met with applause and heaps of praise from all government, opposition, and independent senators in that honorable chamber. And then it goes on to say, all of this has made Senator Arthur a much sought-after person on the local lecture circuit, where his capacity to deal with seemingly almost every possible topic and to all audiences, whether schools, youth organization, businesses, or bankers, has made him a favorite. And therefore, I concur that I met that young man and I was extremely proud of his delivery all along. And then, sir, when the no confidence vote in the then Honorable Prime Minister Sir Lloyd Sandiford, then Sir Lloyd, when that debate, that profound debate came about, he too batted like a man who would have made 2 centuries in that one innings. And therefore, all of the other Labour Party team that would have been there, they threw their weight behind him. And it said in the Advocate newspaper of August the 26th, 1994, owing all the way And so David Simmons, I should say, he spoke to the press and said to the media, Owen Arthur is declared undoubted and undisputed leader of the Barbados Labour Party. And I think, sir, that was what helped to cement him with the confidence of the team that would have been with him, that he could go for 3 consecutive terms as the Prime Minister of Barbados with his astute leadership. And his mantra, as I said, would have been building strong families and communities, the eradication of poverty, and we saw that through the Poverty Alleviation Fund, the provision of effective safety net for the most vulnerable in the society, the reform of the social sector to meet the challenges of the new millennium then, and of course, the creation of a caring society for all. I always admired him for his forthrightness. One could not fathom that smile, that grin on his face all the time. And therefore, I never took a chance of anything underestimating him. I couldn't fathom him. I don't know how the other Alma members did. But he always addressed me as Fordy. Or Ford. He never called me Cynthia. He never called me Miss Ford. Ford, what do you think about it? Ford, you understand politics better than some of these. Here, you know, this is in the period of 1994 to 2001. Ford, you know the civil service, you know, how you understand it so? But I believe that is because I was assigned to an honorable minister in education who was able to help to strengthen me in a number of areas where I did not have the understanding. So our relationship grew for those decades. I had the distinct honor, Mr. Speaker, sir, of being one of the I'm working with his wonderful daughter, Sabrina, in her formative years, and I knew that he loved his daughter dearly. She was his gem. Indeed, I considered her one of my little nieces because at the same primary school where I served for 25 years, there was this beautiful little girl, Sabrina, and my nephew, Corey, and others were in the same class, and I kept my eyes out for her like a real auntie, without even the rest of the staff knowing, because people were nosy in those days, and they took up the certificate and walked around. I don't know about now. And they walked around, and I said, that birth certificate will go no further, and curtailed it right there. And Madam Principal said, Miss Ford, you were right, because nobody was to have exposed him in his capacity, and his wonderful daughter is not their business. And so I latched on to Sabrina, and I am so proud to see how she has developed as the apple of her daddy's eye. And of course, I can't forget little Leah. Leah, too, is another beautiful daughter that he has been doting over his children and his granddaughter in a special way, perhaps I could say, like I have done with my grandchildren. But they have to hear me. I don't know if he had to administer any touches with a little tap or so with his, but I did that with mine, and not to leave any marks or anything. And I know, sir, you will object to me because of the position that you served in the child care board and your social work. But I believe that his children were so well behaved. He worked with those little children, his children, to make sure that they conform with the rules and the regulations of the society. And here they are today, wonderful children. I also want to recall in a brief way, in 2001, after I had been identified, and I know the support of the rest of the cabinet that he was shaping in 1994, when he made me the parliamentary secretary and a senator, I well recall the support that I got from all. And of course, the then 3 of us in the honorable chamber, the other chamber, in the other place, Messrs. Glenn Murray, and Tyrone Barton, no, they were senators too. We had the Senate rocking. And every time the Honorable Prime Minister would say 40 or something else, you know, I said, yes, sir. I have to speak for the people of Barbados and not just for the Barbados Labour Party. And therefore, we were like a tag team. Well, a tag team is more than 2. But the 3 of us, those 2 other honorable senators and myself, we used to make sure that the Senate was always lively and bubbly as we put forward the policies and the programs that came through from the guidance of the Right Honorable Prime Minister. His ex-wife Beverly, in 2001, when he was identified as a senator, as a candidate, she came every day of the campaign at 7:30 in the morning to my house, because she too was a tower of strength in St. Peter, working in the trenches, and then when she heard, she said, Cynthia, I got to be there with you. And every day and every night, she made sure that I prepared myself, got a little rest, sipped my water, things that I never took interest in before, and I don't think I've ever done it since then. But she always made sure that I was on the path to be able to gain some success. And of course, after that experience, the fondness continued. When then another now constituent, because I won that by election in St. Thomas, and his now wife, Julie, a resident of St. Thomas, so she's my constituent. And we two had a wonderful relationship before, because her sister and I were tight, and I would go there to get little things done with my hairs. So I was always in the family, whether it was the direct family or the extended family of the late Right Honorable Member. And so I am eternally grateful for the relationship that we developed, and I want to say how happy I am today to be taking part in this discussion and the celebration of his life and his witness, but also to be able to see his wonderful family here with him. And I thought that the vision of the late Right Honorable Prime Minister for somebody of my upbringing was that he made sure that he invested in a poor country girl to further fulfill his mantra and to lift me and others out of poverty. And today I thank God, excuse me, for the privilege that he has been extended to me. I rose from poverty to Parliament, and a lot of it is to do with the Barbados Labour Party. After my family and my people in the community and the schools where I work had to elevate me to a level, the right late Honorable Owen Seymour Arthur saw something in me, and it has made me very proud. Of course, over the years, there would have been challenges like any other set of human beings. You'll have differences and so on. But I never, ever refrained from extending to the Honorable Member, the Honorable Prime Minister, the feelings and the understanding and the respect that was due to him. His personality was strong, and so was mine. And therefore, I made sure that I didn't rub him up the wrong side or anything, because I know that sometimes I can't be controlled either. But the two of us will be like two, at that. But it never happened at all. I so highly respected and revered him that I really felt very lonely when whatever the difficulty is. And sometimes it is always to do with people carrying news that is not right. And therefore, our relationship started to slacken up. But later on, after 2008, 10, and the confusion and so on, I would see him and I would still say hello, and how are Sabrina, how are Leah, and what about the granddaughter now, and so on and so forth. We will still have an exchange of pleasantries. And that I'm saying that in politics, you get the ups and the downs, but at the end of the day, there should be no malice. And I'm not a malice person, and indeed he was not, because for whatever the quibbling and the confusion and the differences in opinions and so were, at the end of it all, we saw him in the Labour Party, even though he had gone his way, still serving not the Labour Party, but Barbados as a country over the past few months, and of course, reaching into the Caribbean with the brilliance that he has, that very few people can really match him because of the outstanding brilliance and his relationship with people. Very few people can carry that and throw the differences aside. I want to say that the people of St. Peter have lost, and of course the people of Barbados and the region have lost a brilliant, astute son of the soil. We have lost a tower of strength. And when it came to his recording and the filing of his cabinet papers and whatever documentaries there were, he was a boss at it. His library, I understand, was in such a pristine condition. You can just go and pull whatever the document is, and it was all properly cataloged and so. I remember one of the members who was sitting here today that came to be a part of this. If you would allow me, Mr. Speaker, Mr. George Griffith. Once I went down to his house in St. James for a cricket match. We were playing all this cricket, and we would go down and spend time. And he came and he said to him, George, I have these two pairs of Nikes here, man. I really want them, though. And George said, well, they can't fit me. Cynthia, they can fit you. And I said, well, I will try. And that pair of Nikes lasted me about 5 years. And I felt so proud walking in the shoes of a right honorable prime minister. You would not believe it. That when they got broken, I was so sad to know, because I like if somebody gives me something to keep it and keep with care like the apple of my life. I want, Mr. Speaker, as I come to the close, because I know many other honorable members are willing and want to speak, I want to say that the vision of the late Professor, the Right Honorable Owen Seymour Arthur was such for his country, for his people, and for the region, and indeed the world. I'm not going to mention the ship right now. That's another a story. But for his vision that he had for the development of this country was beyond a lot of what I see happened during the period when we were in opposition. And he made sure that the policies and programs were all, as I said earlier, about the empowerment of the ordinary man. So that is where the PSVs and the ZRs came from. When he said for poor people to buy a ZR, that is an investment that can be passed on from generation to generation. He looked at Project Oasis, those are the boys on the block. And we made sure that they were given the necessary skills and opportunities for employment that they too can build their families. We had janitors and general workers who worked for many, many years. And when they left, they just got a little pension, no gratuity, nothing, no security of tenure. It was his mantra. These people must not be disenfranchised. They must now become public workers so that they can go to the bank with a letter, with the documentation, and they will be able to access loans and mortgages and so on. The urban and the rural development, the house box, and the mortgage finance on lending 100% mortgages, and the thousands of houses and properties were accessed through the mortgage finance. The public sector reform, the construction of schools, because a lot of our schools were run down during that period of the 1986 to 1994. And the Honorable Prime Minister said, we have to build schools. Poor people must be in environments that are conducive to learning and safety. And so the All Saints School, with an extension for the community college and a special area for children with special needs, that was a newly constructed facilities. The Ignatia Bayer School, the Lester Vaughan School, St. Christopher's Primary, with a new pavilion that it never had before, because you're catering now to people in the community and engaging them that they will do meaningful things instead of being lawless and moving around. He made sure that the mangrove landfill was changed from Mount Stinkaroo because of the vision he had for making sure that Barbadians become healthy and conscious of their roles. And I'm not going to mention the upgrades. I'm not going to talk about the prison now. I'm not going to talk about international business and so, because he had the vision and he instituted it. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to indicate that when the Right Honorable Prime Minister would talk about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, I saw him as an ordinary man and a boy from the village in St. Peter, rising to excellence, doing extraordinary things for not himself alone, but for families, for Barbadians on the whole, that they know to rise to the level that they can be able to give back to their society. So I take this opportunity to publicly express my gratitude to his family, the extended one as well, to his friends and others who were close to him, my deepest sympathy and that of my family and the people of St. Thomas for one of the best sons of the soil that we have lost within the last few months. We've lost a brilliant man, an astute leader who will be extremely hard to replace in the political arena. And of course, Mr. Speaker, I wish to publicly say to Madam Julie, First Lady then, and now the wife of the deceased, to Sabrina, to Leah, and the granddaughter, and to his siblings, his sisters, Valmir, Richard, and there's one other sister, forgive me, but I can't always remember all of the names, all of the people for whom whose shoulders he would have stood on, who would have propped him up, that he could have achieved so much in his lifetime as being the Right Honorable Prime Minister of this country. I say to the youth out there, take a leaf out of the book of the Professor Right Honorable Owen Seymour Arthur, who because of opportunities by the nurturing of parents, people in the village where he was raised, other persons in other sectors where he had the opportunity to blossom, take a leaf out of his book. It is not where you come from. It is to do with how you pattern your mind and how you create in it the opportunities and take advantages of them, that you can rise from the earth or from the ashes to the next level with God's help and his guidance. And so I say to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and relatives and friends, may God continue to bless you, and may the Right Honorable Owen Seymour Arthur rest in peace. God bless you all. Thank you.
Honorary member for St. George South.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to join this debate to offer my words, not of sympathy, but of condolences and the words that my father used to describe the late Professor Owen Arthur. And I was born in a Labour Party family in a rural village similar to the late Professor Arthur. And why I am a bit emotional, simply because daily I receive messages from my father, even before I assume ministerial duties, of conversation with him and the late Professor Arthur. And their discussions, conversations, were primarily about the Labour Party and governance and who was the best Prime Minister. And I don't want to go further into that, because in the words of my father, Luther Sutherland, my biological father, he had his opinions, most of which I shared. But I can say to you that he had high admiration for the late Professor Owen Arthur. And I don't only speak on behalf of my father, but on behalf of the entire Sutherland family. And to say to the family of Arthur, his wife, Julie, his daughters, his brothers, his nephew, his friends who are sitting in this chamber, and I recognize his friends when I came into politics, active politics, they would die for him, and one is sitting over there, that this country has lost a great leader. We have a void. I heard the member for St. Michaelis mention that we have a void. But I want to stay on the positive side to say, in the words of Plastic Bag, Red Plastic Bag, tell me who our heroes are, and I will hail them from near and from far. You must know famous and notorious. That is a must here in Barbados. You can pick sense from nonsense or sense from those words. And I want to go further to quote the late Professor Arthur as a leader of this great institution and Prime Minister of this country. And he said in these words, "Let us go forward in this battle fortified by conviction that those who labor in the service of a great and good cause will never fail." He never failed this country. He never failed the Labour Party. He never failed the people of Barbados. I've been fortunate when I came to political office, when I offered myself as a candidate for the Labour Party. Leading up to the 2013 election, actually, the day before the 2013 election, I received a call from the late Professor Arthur. Well, no, my dad received the call. They couldn't find me that day. I was all about in the district, trying to get my last lap in to encourage persons to support me on that day. Well, to vote for me, I had the support. And I heard the Prime Minister mention that support is not vote. But the Prime Minister showed up. The former Prime Minister showed up and he said to me, he actually made me feel special when he said to me, every Prime Minister chooses some candidate to spend the day before election with. And I chose you. And we went from Ellerton to Greens to Fair Pilgrim. And the rest is history. I am not as familiar with the late Prime Minister from back in the 1991s, but I served on National Council when he was indeed the chairman, along with the member for St. Michael South. We were young boys on National Council then. And it is there that I picked up some tips about leadership that I use in the private sector as well. You have to be in command of your troops at all times. And certainly he was in command of his troops at all times. But it is through him that I learned the art of reading the estimates. When we sat in opposition, and I use these blue books to make notes. And I share with a few of my colleagues that I have 2 books written out, this size of notes from the late Professor Arthur on estimates. So that when I shadowed certain ministries in opposition, we were able to enter this chamber as opposition members, and we were able to debate vigorously. They cursed us even about our family. But the 5 Young Turks, and I can speak on the 5 Young Turks' behalf back then, benefited from Professor Arthur's wisdom. And of course, we had the support of the member for St. Thomas and the member for St. James Central. But it is there that I hone my skills about policy and what to do and what not to do from that great man, Professor Owen Arthur. But it did not stop there. When I assumed the office, ministerial portfolio of Minister of Small Business, Entrepreneurship, and Commerce, he took to me and he said, you are in a very critical ministry. We need to grow our local economy. And we recognized then that Fund Access was started on by him between those years, 1994 to 2008, to provide financing to the tune of $10,000 and up to $150,000 for those small persons who could not access financing from the banking sector. He started Fund Access for the small business sector, persons who engage in small business to help grow that critical sector called the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector. But that was not all. When he formed UCAL, and I heard the other members spoke about some of the things that he did, and I would mention the ACP-EU partnership agreement, because before he sit down within the next 5 minutes, I would make that document, that speech that he made, a document of the House. But when we formed UCAL, when he formed UCAL, and if we look at what is happening today with that small sector, the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector, we can truly say that Professor Arthur was visionary. Because he recognized that working class people needed the opportunity to be enfranchised and to be empowered, to own their fair share of the rock, to contribute to economic growth of this great nation. And he recognized that tourism alone cannot do it for us. And look at what is happening today. Tourism alone cannot do it for us. While it is the main foreign exchange earner, he recognized that any challenge with our economic, with the first world economies, will impact us. And we needed to grow that sector, the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector, which is growth from within the local sector. So fund access, empowering small working class people, UCAL. Those were some of his projects. And I list 33 major projects that we had. Major, there were others. Within the 14 years under that astute leadership of Professor Arthur. The member for St. Thomas briefly mentioned Project Oasis to train the young people. He more than doubled places at the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic then, now Samuel Jackman Prescott Institution, and the Barbados Community College, and UWI. Because what we now talk about creating scale, only Seymour Arthur recognized then that we needed to create scales in an effort to take people out of poverty, in an effort to have more global citizens, in an effort to make Barbados the best place to live, work, raise a family, and do business. So tell me who our heroes are, and I will hail them from near and from far. And this afternoon I hail Professor Arthur in this Lord Chamber as one of the greats. And I love his words, let us go forward in this battle fortified by conviction that those who labor in the service of a great good and a great cause will never fail. And he never failed. He also said, help the man in the street make sense of the bewildering. Help the average man to make sense of difficult conversations, confusion, what he called complex issues. So he was geared towards empowering working class people at every juncture in his tenure as Prime Minister of this country. And even as opposition leader, he invested in us so that we can come today. And I'm proud, I can say, he taught me the estimates, how to read the estimates. I have a book on agriculture. And my good friend from St. Philip South, who was dear to him as well, he can tell you that I envy him because I love that ministry. It's a good envy because I have notes. Him and I shared notes many evenings when we came from estimates meetings. We sat and we spoke about how good Arthur is. But let's talk about preparing Barbados for today. Let's talk about preparing Barbados for the eventuality that we face. COVID-19 virus struck us. And it is Owen Arthur who said we need to push different frontiers. Yes, tourism is our chief foreign exchange earner. Yes, we have a lot of reserves, but we need to push other frontiers. And it is him who started the drive on renewable energy. The honorable member for St. James Central, whom I admire, and I aspire to be like him. You actually missed this one. they can speak to what they want to speak to, but I speak to the good things politically. The honorable member for St. James Central. We introduced Barbados' first alternative fuel cards, Professor Arthur, and he also introduced the National Sustainable Energy Policy because he recognized that renewable energy was the way to go back then. Isn't this man a great? Tell me who our heroes are, and I will hail them from near and from far. He developed and introduced the National Green Energy Policy, which was the first in Latin America and the Caribbean. That is what he developed. The National Green Energy Policy, which was the first in the Caribbean and Latin America. So when we speak about greats, we can't speak about great. When we speak about greats, great cricketers, we often speak about Sir Garfield Sobers, Sir Viv Richards, Brian Lara, Sir Charlie Griffith. And when we speak about great leaders, we have to mention the word Professor Owen Seymour Arthur as being great. He greened the ABC highway. So his focus on renewable energy, what we are doing now, and I must say, this is a compliment to the Prime Minister of Barbados, the present Prime Minister of Barbados, the member for St. Michael Northeast. What I'm seeing her doing today, and some of the strategies that she has employed in order to take Barbados forward. And as Kofi Annan said when Owen Arthur was the Prime Minister of this country between 1994 and 2008, that Barbados is punching above its weight. Some of these policies were engineered by Professor Arthur. And if you pick up this book, our manifesto, the Labour Party's manifesto, and you turn to the last page, just before the signatures, you will see 33 major achievements between that period, 1994 to 2008. If you doubt me, just pick it up and see. From housing, from renewable energy, to addressing Mount Stinkaroo, redevelopment of Kensington Oval, extending the Deepwater Harbor, and building a new cruise pier. I heard the member for St. James Central mention that. From establishing the Caribbean's first hostel for persons living with HIV and AIDS. Tell me who our heroes are, and I will hail them from near and from far. Mr. Speaker, this afternoon is indeed one of sadness, but indeed we should take the positive from it. We have someone whom we can recognize as a great Caribbean leader. We have someone who we can recognize as one of the greatest prime ministers in the region. We have someone who we can proud to say came from humble origins, ruled Barbados from a working class background, and rose to the status to become Prime Minister of Barbados. That's what development is about. That's what opportunity is about. And he saw it fit to give others the opportunity that he had. But Mr. Speaker, let me end on this note because I know some of my colleagues are eager to speak. And while I endorse everything that has been said before as it relates to the greatness of Professor Arthur, this document, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a document of the House, of this chamber. It's the address by Professor Arthur, then the Right Honorable Owen Arthur, Prime Minister of Barbados, at the opening of the 12th ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly at Sherborne, then Sherborne Conference Center, November 20th, 2006. And in that speech, he challenged the European Commission as it relates to trade liberalization. And we know that the European Union, similar to how his vision for the Caribbean single market and economy, we model the CSME after the European Union when we look at the history. But he said, and I will quote him, it's page 13 of this document, where he said to the European Commission and the leaders of that conference from all over the world, I think they had leaders from over 30 or 40 different nations. He said in his word, this implies that a meaningful EPA, the Economic Partnership Agreement process, it needs clear policies and strategies aimed at bringing about competitiveness in the ACP, the economies, and fairness in the ECP-EU trade. This proactive approach is not compatible with the idea of trying to tackle the wide variety of development circumstances in ACP countries through a one-size-fits-all strategy, but it rather calls for careful design and collaboration. So he was trying to say to the EU, what you took 50 years to achieve, he said countries in the developed world have enjoyed 50 years within which to prepare for their economies and societies to accommodate total liberalization. And they're at that stage in 2006, member for St. James South. Understand where I'm going? In 2006, he was saying to the first world countries, as you seek to bring about trade liberalization, you have to be mindful of the lesser developed countries and the unequal nature of development as it relates to these lesser developed countries. So you took 50 years to achieve trade liberalization and an EU that was functioning, and you are seeking to impose those policies on a Caribbean nation, also on the African and Caribbean and Asian Pacific nations. And he's saying that one size could not fit all. So that's why he was said to be punching above his weight by Kofi Annan, because he challenged first world policies as it relates to bringing about the CSME. But I saw the wider CSME, and I still see the wider CSME as opening up avenues for trade in this country and for small businesses to take their products and services beyond the 166 square miles. This work and the strategy was started by Owen Seymour Arthur, and he challenged all first world policies that did not fit with our developing countries as we seek to build our economy, whether socially, environmentally, economically, and he challenged them. And we see the same thing today with our Prime Minister, our current Prime Minister. We failed, some of us mentioned, and we know, and she keeps saying she learned a lot. The Honorable Member for St. Michael Northeast, she learned a lot from Professor Arthur. And I'm saying that this is a great man. Tell me who our heroes are, and I will hail them from near and from far. So the work that he did between that period, 1994 and 2008, has allowed those persons that he developed, has allowed us now to have a world leader, or a world-class leader in Prime Minister Mayor Amon Motley, member for St. Michael Northeast, who is indeed showing her true worth as it relates to building out Barbados and making it that country that can again boast of punching above its weight. So, Mr. Speaker, I will stop here, and I will say to his family, his wife, his daughters, again, his friends, his nephew, and to us in the Labour Party, and indeed the opposition leader, we have lost a true gem of a leader. We have lost a true gem of a man. We have lost a true gem of a family man. And we've lost a true gem, a son of the soil of this country. May he rest in peace, and may we carry on the work that he has started and the work that he has done to empower working class people and people of all classes in this country. God bless the years he spent on this earth, and hopefully we will see him again in another life. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member for Christchurch East. Christchurch East, Christchurch East.
No,
Mr. Speaker. I rise to be very brief because obviously there's great competition, sir, for spots today, and I don't wish to deprive anybody or shorten their time by virtue of elapsing time. Sir, what does Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Errol Barrow, Owen Arthur have in common? They have something in common. Many great people are reduced to a phrase, or they've coined a phrase that defines them and what they stand for. Malcolm X had, "I have a dream." Sorry, Martin Luther King, had, "I'm glad everybody is listening." Martin Luther King, sir, had, "I had a dream." Anytime you say, "I had a dream," it is synonymous with Martin Luther King. Malcolm X, "by any means necessary." It is in posters, it's on t-shirts, it's in memes. By any means necessary, Malcolm X. Friends of all, satellites of none, Errol Barrow. Face it and fix it, Owen Arthur. Sir, of all the things that I have heard Professor the Right Honorable Owen Arthur say, all the things I've seen him do, the thing that stuck with me most personally, and I have employed and used to great effect, is the phrase, "face it and fix it." It can be applied in every aspect of your life. Every aspect. It can be applied if you have difficulties with your children. It can be applied if you have difficulties in your relationship. It can be applied with business. It can be applied with constituents. It can be applied in government. It can be applied in a ministry. We tend to run from our problems. A lot of us don't want to open the bill because if we don't see it, it ain't you. You get a health check and you don't want to look at the results because until you see it, it's not real. You have a difficulty, you know something is happening, somebody sends you a message, you don't look at it. Because until you see it, you can pretend that things are not as bad as they are. And how many times do we actually just miss the boat or miss the chance to correct something because we took too long to face it and fix it? Sir, the other thing I wish to address, we've heard today about Owen Arthur, the family man. We've heard today about Owen Arthur, the Prime Minister, Owen Arthur, the economist, Owen Arthur, the teacher, Owen Arthur, the friend, Owen Arthur, the mentor. And as noble as all of those were, the thing that stands out most for me for Owen Arthur is Owen Arthur, the regionalist. Owen Arthur perhaps did more for CARICOM and Caribbean integration than perhaps anybody else. He drank his own Kool-Aid. He believed it. And through his belief, we all thought it was possible. Barbados became the country that exemplified CARICOM. We became the de facto lead country for CARICOM. Owen Arthur took the bold step to be one of the people to push for the creation of the Caribbean Court of Justice, which, to my mind, and maybe I'm biased in this perception, but to my mind, that is perhaps the single greatest institution in the Caribbean. We all got independence at different times. For those of us who are independent, how truly independent are we? You may consider yourself independent if you make your own laws. But can you be truly independent when somebody else decides on the application of those laws? Can you be truly independent when the final decision or your final appellate court resides somewhere with people who don't look like you, who don't know your background, who don't know your philosophical leanings, who are completely unaware of the social structures that inform not just the creation of laws, but the behavior and the application of those laws? To my mind, sir, we can never be truly independent unless we are in control of our judicial process. It must begin and reside with us. And when I say with us, sir, I don't necessarily mean limited to Barbados. I mean limited to those that we consider family, those of a similar historical background, those of a similar origin. We've gone outside of Barbados, sir, to look for judges. We've gone outside of Barbados to look for justice of appeal. We in Barbados have decided that for us, no matter where you come from, we want the best for our judicial process. And that is also reflected and amplified when you get up to the CCJ. The CCJ is our final court of appeal. Not all of the judges come from the Caribbean. Not all are from our background. But we have sufficient representation there among the finest legal minds in the world to show our worth and our ability to stand on our own 2 feet. We have shown our ability to craft our own jurisprudence. We have shown our own ability to decide finally and fairly and with exemplary record about things that touch and affect us. We have shown, sir, that our court of first instance for matters involving states can reside with us, not with people for whom powdered wigs is not simply a farce, but is how their hair used to look. And sir, we did not get there by happenstance. We got there by persons fighting for this and sticking to it, and against all of the odds and the clamorings internally and regionally. They said this was the right thing to do. And one of those persons was Owen Seymour Arthur. For a number of years, sir, I sat on the trust fund of the CCJ Trust Fund. That's the fund that manages the resources of the court and funds the court in perpetuity. And I did that because I firmly believe that the survival of our final court was of paramount importance to the survival of our jurisprudence and our way of life as a Caribbean people. But I would never have gotten that chance if it didn't exist. So we look at all the things that Owen Arthur did. And people have touched on those things. They've touched very briefly on what he meant to CARICOM. Owen Arthur was the leader of CARICOM. Don't care who was the chairman of CARICOM at any given point in time, Owen Arthur was effectively the leader of CARICOM. When Owen Arthur spoke on regional issues, everybody listened because they believed that his heart was there. He may play politics at home. He did not play politics regionally. He firmly believed and understood that we are stronger as a unit than we are as small independent countries. The voice of Barbados shouting by itself, it may be heard. We can see recently, sir, it's being heard in every sphere. But the voice of Barbados is one voice. When the voice of Barbados is linked or joined with the voice of Grenada and Guyana and Jamaica and Trinidad and all of the rest, then we become a force to be reckoned with, which we could not do standing alone. A great mind realized that, and he fought to convince others that this was the way to go. We've not fully gotten there, sir, with respect to the other Caribbean territories, adopting the CCJ as its final court of appeal. And you know what? We may never get there. But for Barbados, it has always been seen as progressive. We took the right step at the right time. And sir, I can tell you that our judgments out of the CCJ and the jurisprudence from the CCJ can match anything or surpass anything from any final appellate court anywhere in the world. The Privy Council, sir, has nothing on the CCJ. And that was one of the children of Owen Arthur. So when you call the children of Owen Arthur, and we issue our condolences, and we speak about Leah, and we speak about Sabrina, we should also speak about the CCJ and CARICOM, because they're as much his children as you all were. But sir, the last thing I'm going to say is Owen Arthur was that figure. You either loved him or you hated him. But nobody was ambivalent to Owen Arthur. We did not start out on the right foot. And he showed me some kindness, sir, when I got involved in active politics. We weren't on the right foot when I was the president of Barbados, he was the Prime Minister of Barbados. But there was a critical point in time, sir, when Mr. Arthur showed to me that he put aside whatever issues we had, and he supported me in the 2013 campaign. Even when Mr. Arthur demitted membership in the Barbados Labour Party, we had the same barber. And I know he used to disappear every Friday morning at 5:30 in the morning. I know that because my appointment was 6, and I would get to the barber at 6, and Mr. Arthur would be getting out of the chair. So so I can vouch for him at 5:30 on Friday morning. I can't vouch for anything past that, but I can vouch 5:30 on Friday morning. If he said he was a barber, he was there. But in those little visits, he would stay on a little bit past his haircut, and he would give me advice. A lot of it was sound, well-meaning advice, and it didn't matter where he was with his public rancor with the party at any point in time. It didn't matter what his sayings were out there with respect to the party. He gave me those mornings some real sound advice. And that's the person he was. Somebody said he never really left the Barbados Labour Party. His heart was always there. I think his heart was always there for Barbados, sir. I think his heart was always there for Barbados. And anybody that he could help to help Barbados, he was prepared to do that. So, sir, for the passion that was Owen Arthur, for the loyalty that was Owen Arthur, for the vision or visionary that was Owen Arthur, for the regionalist that was Owen Arthur, for the integrationalist that was Owen Arthur, I say, sir, we will miss him. Because there was never one like him before, and I don't think there will ever be one like him again. So to his family, to his children, one of whom I see quite often, but I see from time to time, wink, wink. I won't say we're a secret spot. My condolences. You have my deepest condolences for a man who made a difference to Barbados and who made a difference to the Caribbean. He will be missed. I'm much obliged, sir.
All right, for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to join this debate very briefly, sir, to give a perspective, sir, as I've heard repeated on numerous occasions during the course of this debate, and reflect on my own journey to where I am today in the context of that reflection. Now, sir, on September 6, 1994, sir, I voted for the first time. And I voted, sir, for the Barbados Labour Party candidate in St. Michael West. And as you know, sir,
Continue, Armor. Don't listen to your sides. Continue, please.
I voted for the Barbados Labour Party candidate, sir, at that time. And the Barbados Labour Party went on to obviously win the election, and the rest, as they would say, sir, is history. But what was important, sir, is that on that day I voted, it was the day before I entered Upper Sixth, sir. And as a young person, coming to grips with adulthood, sir, and coming out of a period of serious structural adjustment in this country, sir, it is clear that what Barbados required then was clear, decisive leadership. Leadership that understood what was required, sir, to move beyond what had transpired over the previous 3 years, where thousands of Barbadians became unemployed, sir. There was an 8% cut for the public servants of this country, sir, which saw increased hardship on the people of this country. And I've heard reference, sir, throughout today, of Mr. Arthur indicating that he was in politics to stop poor people, sir, from being poor. And I start there, sir, simply because I am one of those poor people, sir, that having voted for the Barbados Labour Party in 1994, I can say today, sir, that not just myself, but certainly as a boy growing up in Bank Hall, not too far from Peterkin, sir, to be precise. But equally, sir, my wife growing up as a girl from Gaw Hill, that we are both beneficiaries of that philosophy, sir, because having left school, we both were able to pursue undergraduate studies at the University of West Indies. Because I recall distinctly, sir, that when I was in junior school, there were persons who coming through during that harsh time between 1990 and certainly 1994, sir, the economy in the way that it was, that persons had to defer going to the University of West Indies because they had to find work, sir, because of the circumstances. So I find myself, sir, as fortunate to be able to move from school into university. And I recall, sir, some of my friends from school who had to go and find work first, coming into the university, sir, subsequently in the latter half of the 1990s. And most of these persons are coming from very humble beginnings, in the same way that Mr. Arthur certainly would have risen from humble beginnings, and benefiting, sir, from the investment in the people of this country through access to tertiary education. That it is important that we understand that public policy is complicated, sir, and getting it right is important because it makes a substantive difference, sir, not just to the lives of individuals like myself, but certainly it makes a substantive difference, sir, to the welfare of a large number of persons and families across this country. And so when Mr. Arthur made the statement that he wanted a graduate in every household, sir, I am that graduate in my household. My wife is that graduate in her household, sir. And subsequent to that, sir, her brother now has graduated from the University of West Indies. But that is the kind of success, sir, and the investment in people that is critical to ensuring that we can carry the baton forward. Now, sir, you will hear me speak of my wife and myself interchangeably because before she decided to change careers, sir, she was an economist at the Central Bank doing public finance, and she reminded me that when she was doing the public finance at the Central Bank, sir, had occasion to attend the annual meetings with Mr. Arthur, sir, in 1999, which, as you could appreciate, sir, for a young economist, is quite an experience. And is instructive, sir, because over the last 2 years, I have attended the annual meetings of the IMF and the World Bank in the same way that Mr. Arthur did. And it is in a strange way, sir, quite fortuitous that I find myself representing Barbados in the same way that Mr. Arthur would have as Prime Minister and Minister of Finance at that time. And had it not been for that vote, sir, in 1994, certainly with myself and thousands of other young people across the country, that some of these things may not have been possible. And it is for that reason, sir, that in 2014, when the Democratic Party, sir, eliminated or changed the policy, sir, with respect to tuition supporting Barbadians at University of West Indies, that incensed me, sir, so much because I know my own journey, my wife's journey, and thousands of other Barbadians' journey with respect to the investment in young people. That the reason I'm here today, in part, sir, is because, one, I benefited from all that Barbados has had to offer, sir, personally, and at a time that Barbados requires of all of us the absolute commitment to a country, that I feel, as if, sir, I have a role to play in helping to bring a next generation of Barbadians, sir, to the fore, in the same way that Mr. Arthur's leadership, sir, would have brought to this country. And it is important, sir, that we all understand that the decisions that we make as politicians, the decisions we make as policymakers, that we are here, sir, to support people and to move people from their current circumstances to a better circumstance, sir. And therefore, it is critically important that the people of Barbados and us as their representatives understand the balance that requires of all of us. Now, sir, as an economist, I could not leave this debate without speaking on the economics, because the truth is, sir, Mr. Arthur, as a prime minister, as an economist, certainly regionally, and certainly here in Barbados, would have brought a certain swagger, if you like, sir, to the profession. And as economists, seeing Mr. Arthur perform, not just at the domestic level, regional level, but international level, but it gave the profession a sense of pride and confidence, sir, that here it is, that a son of the soil could respond to the most dire circumstances, sir, and to move Barbados from where we would have found it in 1994 to where we would have left it, sir, in 2008. But I want to speak to that, sir, not from an economic philosophy perspective, but I'm going to speak to it, sir, from a perspective of automobiles, sir. Because the execution of public policy or the crafting of public policy, sir, is often complicated. Very complicated. And as economists, we tend to look for what we call secondary and tertiary wrong effects, sir, in terms of the introduction of policy and the impact it will have on this and the next and the third, sir, the multiplier effect. Those are the technical jargon, sir. But the reality is this, sir. During 1994, sir, to 2008, Mr. Arthur made economic policy seem too easy. Too easy. But it was not for lack of hard work, sir, but he made it look easy. Now, sir, for most persons, I come to the analogy. For most persons, the experience of Mr. Arthur's leadership, sir, during his tenure was like an automatic vehicle. You have park, you have reverse, you have neutral, you have drive. Easy. But in reality, sir, and I've heard references from members throughout the day, if you Google right now, sir, and through you, sir, I ask all Barbadians to Google Mack truck gears. You can Google it, sir. And you will see the illustration of what is required to drive or move a Mack truck. 20 gears, sir. And the pictorial is quite confusing if you don't understand how to drive a Mack truck. And therefore, I'm saying to all Barbadians that who you entrust with the stewardship of the country must first understand, sir, the complexity of the execution of public policy and how it affects your lives. So I recall, for example, sir, most Barbadians were enamored with the fact that you can have your mortgage interest deducted, you can have your credit union contributions as part of your tax allowance. There was a whole slew of things, sir, that were available to Barbadians under Mr. Arthur's tenure. That quite quickly after the change of government in 2008, sir, all of a sudden became complicated. All of a sudden, things didn't make sense. And that's simply because, sir, we chose a different path with persons who were not equipped, sir, to be able to even understand how to move the truck, how to get in first gear in the first place. Because all that they see, and what I'm hearing today, sir, if you read the papers and the papers are accurate, is that they seem to be gearing up for an election. But they still have not come to grips, sir, with what is required to govern a country like Barbados. And the truth is, sir, Barbados is a small economy, yes. But the waters are always rough, sir. And because the waters are always rough for Barbados, it requires personnel who are capable of navigating, sir, extreme circumstances. And certainly, sir, I am proud to be part of a government right now that has demonstrated up until now that no matter the conditions out there, sir, that this government will ensure that we chart a path that allows ordinary Barbadians to come along the journey. Because no matter how rough the waters get, sir, and certainly COVID-19, sir, unlike 2 years ago, COVID-19 has shown a level of impact that I can tell you, sir, thinking about how we're going to get through this process is not easy, furthermore, execution. But this government will not rest. We will not throw our hands in the air and ask what to do, when to do it, how to do it, sir. We have engaged with all of these social partners in the process, but as a government, we will continue in the same way that Mr. Arthur would have demonstrated leadership in times of crisis. Because it is important, sir, first to understand that governing is not a simple process as getting in the car and turning the key and moving it from park to drive, sir. Barbados, like any other economy, sir, is like a Mack truck. And the driver, the captain, the prime minister, the cabinet, the team have to be capable, sir, of understanding which gear is required at what point in time. And Mr. Arthur, sir, as I said earlier, made that look too easy. And I applaud it because it is skill. It is skill. And thousands of Barbadians, sir, would have benefited from his stewardship. And by extension, across the region, would have inspired a level of investment and confidence, sir, that I think, as the member for Christchurch East would have referred, it felt to me, sir, personally, that coming into 2006 and 7, we were the closest, I believe, ever since Federation, to seeing the CSME come to reality. And it is quite sad that we didn't quite get to that point. Because had we did achieve that objective in 2006-7, then the region's response to COVID-19 today would have been completely different. But that was Mr. Arthur's vision, sir, and I want to wholeheartedly support his approach to understanding that to improve the lives of ordinary people required sound public policy and not election rhetoric. And therefore, I say through you, sir, to the people of Barbados, that the example of Mr. Arthur in terms of the execution of government's policy is critical to understanding how your own life and that of your family will be impacted, certainly not just in Barbados, but in the context of what is happening globally. And I feel proud, sir, to stand here today as one of those poor people who I assume Mr. Arthur was referring to be able to stand in this chamber, being the beneficiary of the investment, sir, the investment that this Barbados Labour Party continues to make in young people. And certainly as we came to office, sir, and I remind the public through you, sir, that our reinvestment in young people to attain the University of West Indies, sir, tuition free. There's a cost, but tuition free, sir, is important to the development or the continued development, sir, of this country, because in 10, 15 years' time, sir, there must be some set of other people coming to this place, sir, who are capable of responding to the challenges of that time. And this government will ensure, sir, that we continue along that path. No, sir, I did not serve with Mr. Arthur, but I can say to you, I recall, sir, one afternoon, I was at home in my veranda, sir, and this is probably 1998, 99, around that time, sir. And at that time, M50 was, I believe it was a black Honda something. I'm not good with cars, so Lexus. Oh. And M50 pulled up in front of my door, and the window rolls down, and there is Mr. Prime Minister Arthur, which of course, sir, I am completely surprised. One of our neighbors had passed, and he came to ask for directions for the house. And we told him just around the corner. And that, sir, at that time was instructive, because nobody expected the Prime Minister, as busy as he was, representing Barbados and trying to get the country out to be, certainly in Preturking, looking to extend condolences to a family, obviously, that he knew. But it was just not expected. But I imagine that was just the nature of the man. But in recent times, sir, we've had a chance to have some conversations in relation to the work, certain that he did with the Ministry of International Business and Industry, sir, in relation to the industrial policy. And coming out of the Jobs and Investment Council, sir, we had a number of conversations around, sir, and again, consistent with the mantra of in politics to stop poor people from being poor. Mr. Arthur was quite concerned, which I share the concern, sir, that during this pandemic, the impact, sir, on households and poor people, he was very concerned that households could potentially go bankrupt in this pandemic. And the impact that would have on not just poor people, but making people poorer. And therefore, we had a number of conversations about what the government could do potentially to respond to that in a way that not just provides social protection, but equally will see a much more resilient economy. Now, and Mr. Arthur acknowledged quite clearly that we had from the inception a lot of work to do. He acknowledged that. And therefore the pandemic just amplified further that which he was concerned about, because during the last decade, sir, as we know, persons were not saving as they were during Mr. Arthur's time. And therefore his concern was that in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic, that the long-term economic prospects for the country may be impaired simply because as households are having to spend more resources just to survive, that it may be difficult for the economy to recover unless certainly the government would intervene in a manner that would allow for as much economic activity to be generated as possible. And we had a few conversations on how that can be how that would unfold. And I can say to this honorable chamber, sir, that this government shares the concerns that he expressed to us, and we certainly will work to provide that buffer to ensure that as many households, but as well as businesses, can be able to get out of this situation as smoothly as possible. But again, that, sir, is consistent with the philosophy as exposed to that with respect to ensuring that poor people not just don't remain poor, but from our perspective, to ensure that we can mitigate against the worst impact with respect to COVID-19. And these are just some of the reflections, sir, as an economist, that I can say that as we go through the next 12 months, 2 years, sir, responding to COVID in the first instance, but over the long term, sir, ensuring that we invest in the transformation of the lives of ordinary Barbadians, that I am confident, sir, that we will live up to the ideals of Mr. Arthur. And I want, on behalf of the people of Christchurch East Central, and certainly on behalf of my family, to extend condolences to his family, and to rest assured that this government intends to continue on the good work that Mr. Arthur would have done on behalf of this country, such that his name and his legacy will be forever known to be of good works on behalf of the people of Barbados. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And this evening, I rise with my colleagues to pay honor to a Prime Minister who stood head and shoulders above many others of his time. I stand this evening to honor a brilliant man and to thank his family for sharing him with us. And we are a grateful nation for the tremendous work that he has done. Owen Seymour Arthur had a giant of an intellect. He was a titan when it came to economics. He was a prime minister of tremendous ability and of tremendous stature. What was interesting about him is that there are many people who are economists, who study economics. But Owen Arthur had a flair, and in church we will call it a tremendous anointing for the effective use of economics in order to build and shape policy, in order to lead and govern a nation. And why was this so? Because he came at a time when we were at a watershed moment in the life of Barbados, where the dynamics of the world had changed so significantly that what governance of a small nation like Barbados was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, that had now disappeared, and a new international environment had arrived on the scene that challenged the survival of all countries, and only those countries that could make the transition, that could make the change, were going to be able to be successful in a very new world. And God gave Owen Arthur as a gift to this nation for such a time as that, because he stood over a watershed moment and understood how important it was for us to safely transition into a new world. And this is one of the reasons why he would have coined that phrase that was shared earlier: help the man in the street make sense of the bewildering change that threatens to engulf him. Help the man in the street to make sense of the bewildering change that threatens to engulf him. And indeed, many small nations across the world found themselves threatened by change that they could not understand, and were finding it difficult to make the transition into a globalized environment. And Owen Arthur's walk took him to many streets. One of the streets that he found himself in was in 1998, when he was there to represent CARICOM at an IMF World Bank program, where he had to make representation on behalf of CARICOM countries in relation to this huge, powerful organization that held your life in their hands. And he said to them that in the age of global interdependence, manner matters when implementing measures. He went on to say, we feel very strongly that there's a tendency by staff of these institutions to analyze our circumstances as if they are no different than those of large countries, with the same endowment range, with the production flexibility, institutional depth, and their adjustment options. This is what he said to them. And the point that he was making on that street was to help the powerful to understand that when they made decisions, when they made determinations, that they affected the lives of millions of people who live in the far-flung corners of the earth. And that this affected whether they could eat bread, get water, or whether their young people could dream dreams. That this depended on their outlook. And he saw them as the ones in bewilderment because they did not understand the differences between small countries and large countries and our ability to be able to respond, and thus their tendency to put on us conditions that were not favorable to us, that this was inimical to our well-being. And so he represented us there in terms of constantly sharing with them that they need to treat us differently. And indeed, Barbados has had to fight that battle with others many times to gain acceptance by others for what our real, genuine circumstances were. It took years to get them to appreciate that we needed special and differential treatment. It took years to help them to appreciate that we were small island developing states, and therefore they needed to treat us differently. And so we have tried, as we have moved on, to be able to bear that in mind when we engage multilateral organizations, that the manner matters when you're implementing measures. In 2006, speaking at a Chamber of Commerce breakfast meeting, Owen Arthur was able to share with business people a concept that at first I didn't quite understand because I'd never butt upon it before. He said that in order for an economy to flourish, there must be confidence. And I thought that was strange. I thought you needed resources. I thought you needed initiatives. But he said you need confidence. And here was a room full of business people looking for initiatives, and he spoke about confidence. And he made this statement that I will always remember. He said, look, government policy must be sound, and government policy must be certain. He said, any policy that you put in place must be examined 360 degrees to ensure that the policy will deliver that which you want it to do, that it did not have unintended consequences, that it could be effective, that it was doable, that it would solve the problem. And he said, that's just the first step. The second step is that there must be certainty, meaning that the way in which it was implemented, the speed at which it was implemented must allow that policy to be effective. And so he knew that in order to take policy and turn it into goodness for a country required that your public sector, your civil service, was up to the task of delivering on the policy initiatives, implementing it properly, and that you also needed your private sector actors to partner with the government, working together to help to bring prosperity and transformation to a nation. And so he drove civil servants. He demanded the best out of them. He asked for them to give him of their best, inspiring them to do the necessary work to transform Barbados. And for those civil servants who were committed, who were hardworking, who caught a vision of what he was sharing and the importance of what they had to do, these civil servants shone. They gained experience and contributed massively to the transformation of Barbados. This was how he got the change, by being able to inspire civil servants to give of their best. And then he partnered significantly with the private sector. And I had the privilege of being part of the private sector when he was in office. And during my time as the president of the SBA, we were one of the many partners that he worked with to be able to bring transformation to the small business sector. Owen Arthur was deeply committed to the necessity of getting small people to be able to own a piece of the rock, to participate in who and what Barbados was. And therefore, he was committed to helping small businesses to be able to grow. He did not cry over the small black man. He did something about the circumstances of the small black man. And therefore, when he came into office, one of the things he did was to pursue a very aggressive program of financing for small businesses. And one of the things that he was especially proud about was the fact that in the history of Barbados, the Barbados Labour Party administration was the first administration to place close to $150 million at the disposal of small business development. And he spread them over 4 institutions: Enterprise Growth Fund, Fund Access, RDC, UDC, and also venture capital in the Small Business Association. And he knew that by empowering them to so do, that we were going to be able to develop a cadre of small businesses and build a culture of entrepreneurship. I just want to share briefly what were some of the successes that occurred. In the RDC program, we were able to provide training for over 1,221 small businesses, micro businesses. And RDC was able every year to be able to provide small loans to as many as 100 micro businesses, covering things like doing leather craft or hairdressing or doing design or fishing, being able to do agriculture. A whole set of small businesses got a startup from that RDC program. But the brilliance of the man was that he didn't just provide it, he always thought of how he could get the maximum out of any one movement. So what did he do? Those 1,221 people who were trained in small business development were trained by the members of the Small Business Association. Small business people training small business people to do business. And this was very important because it allowed the Small Business Association itself to be able to earn from out of those contracts and therefore have monies to assist its members. And then the third thing he did, not only did he provide training and financing, government procurement, because he recognized that it was important for small businesses to have the opportunities that big businesses had in getting government contracts that helped them to be successful and helped them to be prosperous. And so he tasked the government units to ensure that small businesses were able to participate in government contracts. And so we were able to get contracts in doing school uniforms, uniforms for government offices, furniture, landscaping, fencing, road building, and housing construction. Because at the bottom of everything that Owen Arthur did was sound policy, and policy that was certain. He always said that if you do that, your country will flourish, and so the small business sector flourished. And lastly, Owen Arthur walked the streets that led him to the University of the West Indies, to Cave Hill, helping the man in the street to make sense of the bewildering change that seeks to engulf him. Owen Arthur was a teacher by nature, and he taught Caribbean economic affairs at Cave Hill. And the man in the street that he was helping was me. I was his student. I was bewildered by economics. I took first year economics, and I thought to myself, if I'm going to pass my university degree, I need to stay far away from this subject. And so I did. But as you would know, there was a confluence of circumstances, disgusting circumstances, that forced me to have to engage economics again. And I had to take Caribbean Economic Affairs, and with great trepidation, I turned up for that class, me and about 3 other people who had difficulty with econ. I did not know how I was going to pass it, because if first year econ was difficult, a third year course was not going to be easy. Mind you, Owen Arthur was so good at what he did, his ability to take concepts and explain them, break them down and link them to the ordinary, everyday lives of people. And as we sat there, economics came alive. And that transformed the education of a number of people sitting under his tutelage, now engaging econ with a passion, now engaging its concepts and understanding how they could translate it into what they did in their professions. And what that did for me was help to give me a passion not only for econ, but for CARICOM, and a vision for the growth and the development and upliftment of people through effective policy. I'm deeply grateful to him for what he did in helping to translate the concepts from a book and make it a living thing. Not only did it change my professional life, because then I was able to use it to advance what I did as a management consultant, it has also been extremely helpful in the ministry where I am right now, that even as the economists sat around yesterday and we were discussing the issue of the assured demand framework that we were grappling with in looking at changes to the CET, bearing in mind that everything you do must have a positive impact on people's lives, and your policy must deliver the results that it needs to deliver in order to transform people's lives. I was able to keep our team focused on what are the changes that we need to make to this policy to make this policy work for our enterprises, that we can grow the demand across the region for our goods and services and position our enterprises for prosperity, not only within the region, but also across the world. He had taught us to know your landscape, understand its nature, understand the people that you're governing and their culture and their circumstances, investigate the causes underlying that which you are seeking to address, and that will guide you in how to implement policy and what policy you need to engage. So Barbados was blessed with a great man, and I'm deeply grateful to him for all I've learned. A legendary leader, outstanding and dedicated. I want to sincerely thank CBC for the terrific job they did in showcasing the man Owen Seymour Arthur in the series that they presented on his life, his thoughts, his vision. You genuinely could not help but be inspired and captivated by the brilliance of the man. We learned at his feet, and he brought light to our minds and helped us to make sense of the bewildering change that was around us. His life can be summed up in these words: the lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will not be long, but certainly it is my obligation to also go on the record in this tribute to one of the greatest Barbadians who ever lived, as not only because I represent part of St. Peter, in fact 20% of my constituency is in the parish of St. Peter, the Wim, Aston Hall, and Roadview Bakers as well, and some of Black Bess. 20% of those on my voters list live in the live in the parish of St. Peter. And in fact, when the late Professor Arthur first entered electoral politics, all those areas were in the constituency of St. Peter. Therefore, on behalf of my constituents, particularly in those areas, I wish deep sympathy to his family, his wife Julie, his children, his siblings, and of course his first wife as well, and thank them profusely on behalf of my constituents for lending Owen Seymour Arthur to not only the people of St. Peter, the people of Barbados, people of the Caribbean region, but also the people of the world. Because, of course, a lot has been said today, sir, his achievements, and certainly I will not repeat his achievements. All have been well documented today in terms of lowering the unemployment from an astronomical high of 24% in September 1994 when he became Prime Minister to approximately 7%, as I've said many times in this Parliament and outside of this Parliament, 7%, the lowest unemployment percentage rate in this country since the abolition of slavery almost 200 years ago, 180 years ago. That alone marks out the legacy of the great man, but also leading Barbados at the greatest period of economic growth and transformation this country has seen, and coming, of course, in between periods both before and after by the Democratic Labour Party, where you had continuous negative growth, but also the housing policies which he would have championed as Prime Minister, sir, leader of this country, and all the achievements internally that he led as the political leader of this country. But clearly, sir, I would want to focus in my short time on his legacy as a Caribbean leader, as a Caribbean political leader, and certainly the manner in which he made us proud to be Barbadians again after the lean period we went through of Democratic Labour Party government. His stand against the United States of America on the Ship Rider Agreement, sir, has been spoken of in this Parliament. His ability to stand up as an equal to the powers that be in the most influential and powerful country in the world. Certainly at that time it was. And there was one Caribbean Prime Minister who shall remain nameless, sir, who said that he wished he had the courage and fortitude of the late Prime Minister Owen Arthur to stand up to the United States of America and defend the sovereignty of his country and say no on the Ship Rider Agreement. And also, sir, as has been spoken, his piloting of the Caribbean Court of Justice, sir, cannot be underestimated. Leading and establishing a court at regional level, final court of appeal for Barbados, and unfortunately, only 4 of our CARICOM countries are yet still members of it. And also his leadership at the Caribbean single market level, We don't have the economy, sir. And I felt so proud of it, so that in January 2006, when the agreement to bring in the CSM was signed at the University of the West Indies morning in Jamaica, I went up to witness the signature, sir. And his leadership, has been said, of the Caribbean integration movement, whether he was formerly the head of CARICOM, which he was as Barbadian Prime Minister, but whether he was actually head as, as happens on a rotation basis every 6 months, Prime Minister of a different member country is leader, whether he was that or not, he was recognized by all his contemporaries and by the international community as the leading Prime Minister in Barbados. And the pride that he restored in the Barbadian brand, as Prime Minister Ralph Gonzalez mentioned, sir, and that pride that caused the United Nations Secretary General then, Kofi Annan, to say that Barbados, as a small island state, punched above its weight and held its place among the group of nations internationally. So, and for that alone, in addition to all his legacies in terms of improving the lives of the people of Barbados at every level, stands out as the legacy of Professor Owen Seymour Arthur. So even though, in terms of my relationship with him, sir, even though, of course, as everyone knows, I was born into a Barbados Labour Party family, sir, I only joined the party formally in 1993 after he became leader of the party. And that has been said. In fact, the Honorable Raul Eastman, when I was seeking nomination, spoke about that I went to Raul and said, look, I want to join the party. Owen Arthur is now leader of this party. I'm satisfied that the image of the Barbados Labour Party, as has been said on the floor of this parliament today, which before, even though all the historical facts which show that the Barbados Labour Party did a tremendous amount, more than any other party in this country for the working class in this country, the perception, sir, was still there that the Labour Party was a party of the middle-income people and was not as Labour as it ought to have been. And I joined it just after Owen Seymour Arthur became leader. And I was satisfied that he was the person, the honourable member for St. Andrew, who was Member of Parliament at the time, spoke about the tusslings for the leadership after Sir Henry Ford resigned. I was satisfied that Professor Arthur was the best person. And I remember where I was when I heard, when a breaking news flash came over that evening, about 7:30, that Owen Seymour Arthur was now the leader of the Barbados Labour Party. And I went and put in my membership application, sir. And he, more than anyone else, sir, is responsible for the perception. The perception, it was a fact before, but yes, as has been said, in politics, sometimes perception counts more than facts. But he, more than anyone else, was responsible for the perception that the Barbados Labour Party changed and went through a transformation and was recognized as a party for everyone. And became Prime Minister, sir, and it was a stroke of genius, never before happened. In the whole Caribbean, the vote of no confidence which succeeded against the Democratic Labour Party in think it was May, or certainly if not May, June 1994. And he was being urged, sir, to hold a vote of no confidence bring a vote of no confidence in Parliament before that time. And he said, wait until the right time. And that whole episode showed not only his economic acumen, but his political acumen, which I would agree, as earlier said today, would have been, of course, harnessed as being one of only 3 opposition members of Parliament in a Parliament of 27 for 8 years, certainly opposition Barbados Labour Party members of Parliament in a Parliament of 27 between 1986 and 1994. And his first term as Prime Minister, sir, I always say, a term of almost perfection in terms of what was achieved socially and economically in Barbados, much of which has been documented today. So much so that for the first time in the history of Barbados, a party in government increased its majority in its second term of office, 26-2. Sir, a vote of full confidence in the policies and leadership of Owen Seymour Arthur by the people of Barbados. And, sir, his legacies in every area of society stand out. Of course, he wasn't able to complete the natural transformation of Barbados' sovereignty now to take us into a republic, but I was certainly extremely pleased to hear last Tuesday in the throne speech the intention of this governing party, of which I'm a proud member, to take Barbados into the republic status. That would complete what Owen intended to be done in terms of full sovereignty of the Barbados nationhood. And sir, I owe him as well my first entries into public life. I remember a Saturday morning walking in Bridgetown with my wife, and my first child, my second child, would not have been born yet, and someone meeting me and telling me, congrats, I am now chairman of the Severance Payments Board. And I told them, but how am I chairman of Severance Payments Board? But I know nothing about this, you know, and I haven't been asked, nothing. So in the next 2 weeks, to be frank, I receive an instrument with the signature of, you know, Owen Seymour Arthur's fancy signature appointing me chairman. I suppose he had full confidence that I would not say no. And all the other appointments that were given to me during the period he was Prime Minister, whether at National Housing, Deputy Chair, in terms of the Committee promoting the rights of people with disabilities, Deputy Chair, National Conservation Commission Chairman. And I am eternally grateful to him and his cabinet for having the confidence in me to lead me into the public life, and where I have gone on from there to be a member of this Parliament as well. So, sir, I again wish to commend his family and thank them tremendously for sharing such a great personality and individual with the people of Barbados. Politics is not an easy life for the family of those of us who enter, and it would be even harder, more difficult for those in the top leadership positions. But he led a life which was worth living, sir, and we thank the Lord for lending him to us. And really and truly, all of his life came together from his humble background, and obviously the psyche that he had in terms of coming together and reaching the top position. So, of course, the end of his elected political career was one of a bit of controversy. It saddened me to see him leave the Barbados Labour Party, sir. And I suppose the whole episode speaks towards the need for us, not only as a party, but as a country, to be able to define a role for a former Prime Minister who still remains in Parliament. So, and I think that is where the critical point comes, because the other party, sir, had that problem as well, sir. We heard Sir Lloyd Sandiford complaining about his lack of role within the other party on it. I know the Honourable Prime Minister, Present Prime Minister, sought to define a role for Owen Arthur, sir, Professor Arthur. And I suppose that is a challenge that we need to confront, the role which you play, because it can't be easy either for someone who strode Barbados like a colossus for 14 years, the longest serving Prime Minister of Barbados, Prime Minister of Barbados, and then you're no longer Prime Minister, but you're still in Parliament, and we have to seek to define that role. But it is to his commendation, sir, and to the commendation of the now Honourable Prime Minister, that after May 2018, with the Barbados Labour Party back in office, that roads were found for him to channel his tremendous experience, his tremendous intellect for the service of Barbados in terms of the preparation for UNCTAD as a consultant, the chairmanship of LEAC, his role in terms at Caribbean level as I think chairman of the commission or the body overseeing the Guyana elections, and other roles that he played in terms of mentoring members of Parliament, younger members of this Parliament, sir. Therefore, again, on behalf of the people of St. James North, my constituents, as I said, 20% of whom reside in the parish of St. People, I place on record the tremendous acknowledgement of the achievements of Owen Seymour Arthur to this country and to our region. I'm much obliged to you, sir.
Microphone, put on mic. Mic on, please.
Beg to move, sir, this House be suspended until 5 to 9.
5 to 9?
Second that, sir.
The question is that this honorable chamber be suspended under 5 minutes to 9 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 5 minutes to 9.